I'm Dr. Brad Hafford, archaeologist and economic anthropologist. Welcome to Nook, where I take a close look at a banknote from the relatively recent past. Currency notes and coinage do more than simply facilitate exchange. They also carry messages over long distances, messages that say something about the authority that issued them and the people who used them. It's these messages that I'm investigating for a particular example in each short episode. I've researched the meanings as much as I can, but there are still some that I'm interpreting from historical knowledge or intuiting from a general feeling. So I could be wrong on some of these meanings. But the exploration of symbols, imagery, and text on the notes should lead to some interesting thoughts nonetheless. Today, we look at a 100 rial banknote issued in Iran in 1975 and counterstamped in 1979. We begin by looking at the obverse, or the front of the note. Text on the obverse usually concentrates on the legal authority to issue the note, perhaps the bank that backed it and/or the laws that authorized it. In this case, that authority, in 1975, was the Kingdom of Iran. The text on the obverse is Persian, Farsi, and at the top it states Bank Markazi al-Iran, which means the Central Bank of Iran. Beneath that is written Sad rial, which in Persian is 100 rials. Numbers used in Arabic and Farsi are actually derived from India. The numbers used in Latinate script are called Arabic numerals, but they aren't really the same symbols as those used by Arabs or Persians. Many numbers appear similar, such as the 1 in 100, while the zeros are closed dots. Other numerals are quite different. For example, a 5 written in the Arabic script looks like a 0 in Latinate script, and the Persians turn that shape into an inverted heart as seen in the serial number here, which is 885863. The obverse of a note typically also includes signatures of financial representatives of the bank or country that issued it, and this is no exception. But often the most prominent image on the front of a note is that of the leader or other important person of the nation in question. In this case, the original note of 1975 had a prominent image of the Shah, the King of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. His image is now almost completely covered by a heavy counterstamp. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 declared a new Islamic republic, and the monarchy was ousted. The Shah went into exile in Egypt. Because the new regime did not yet have time to design and print new money, it counterstamped the Shah's notes to obliterate his image, covering it with a more traditional Islamic design. The dark black ink is quite effective. Only by close examination can the image of the former Shah be seen. I'll show a note that has not been overstamped for comparison. The Shah's image also appeared on the watermark. A watermark is inside the paper itself, slightly thinner so that it lets light through more easily. It looks blank when viewed normally, but when lit from behind, it becomes visible. Such a mark is the protection, part of it, placed on most banknotes to make them more difficult to copy. Not only would a counterfeiter have to duplicate the intricate design and color of the note, but also the paper itself. Here, however, the watermark was the hated image of the former king, and it had to be obscured. Thus, it was covered with a counterstamp of the very traditional Persian lion brandishing a scimitar in its paw, while the sun shines brightly behind it. The emblem dates back to the 12th century and is known in Persian as Shiro Khorshid. It was part of the Iranian flag prior to the 1979 revolution. The lion and sun are often said to stand for the state and the Islamic religion, but they have multiple interpretations. The Iranian government may have changed, but the history of the nation and its cultural heritage naturally remained, making many of the symbols that had been in use in the past still relevant. And this note carries many such images. The central background, for example, is a multicolored geometric design that derives from traditional Persian carpet manufacture. Overlain on this is an organic, almost floral design, and it's quite similar to that used in the counterstamp over the Shah's image to the right. In the lower left corner are flowers, rather generically drawn, but likely representing important flora of Iran, perhaps the reverse tulip, Fritillaria persica, and the crocus, Crocus sativus. In the lower right corner are what are probably generic stone carving designs, but they are somewhat similar to those found in the Persian city of Persepolis, and this was a very ancient capital of the Persians. Finally, there is the elaborate border of interwoven lines in maroon and black. The fine engraving in many colors are all another part of the anti-counterfeit protections, as well as a reflection of Persian art and culture. So now let's look at the reverse. The back of a note often emphasizes the circulating value and the laws that protect that value. This particular note puts the text on the reverse in Latinate script rather than Farsi. This would allow visitors from lands that use that script to more easily understand the circulating value of the note. However, there is little text here, and the design is not as complex as the obverse. The main image is of the marble palace in Tehran, known as the Khak-e-Marmar in Farsi. It was one of the residences of the Shah until he turned it into a museum in 1970. The dome atop is modeled on the Sheikh Lutfallah Mosque in Isfahan. It was completed in 1937 for Mohammad Reza Shah's father, originally to host state functions. An assassination attempt on the Shah at the palace in 1965 eventually led to its closing. At the left of the building grows a large tree. This is the Mediterranean cypress, the national tree of Iran, and a bit left of that in the border is a flower, again rather generically drawn, but likely to represent the Persian rose, Rosa persica. The same generic flowers seen on the obverse also appear on the reverse, only in different colors, more muted, and directly behind those of the front. Here we have no counterstamp, because none of the images were overly offensive to the new regime. The palace was no longer a museum to the Shah, of course, but it was a building still in Tehran, and the watermark is difficult to see even from this side with the heavy counterstep on the front. So, what does this note tell us about Iran in the 1970s, and how does that compare with what we know from history? The first and most obvious point is that the 1979 revolution occurred. The note was issued before it, and of course does not depict the revolution itself, but it is clear that it happened from the fact that the king is blotted out, while still allowing the paper money to circulate until new notes could be issued. The Shah had rapidly westernized Iran. Too rapidly, many would say. It meant a huge increase in capital, especially from Western oil companies, but that capital was not evenly spread across Iran and its population. People in rural environments suffered particularly, and eventually they had had enough. They protested throughout 1978, and the exiled religious leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, continued to campaign against the Shah from outside the country. Finally, in January of 1979, the Shah fled, and Khomeini returned to declare a new Islamic republic. Of course, the economy of Iran was badly disrupted by the revolution. Foreign companies left, and the result was an estimated 40% per capita income loss. But the Shah had not been representative of all Iranians, and many felt he was simply in the control of the US and UK, who supported him for the oil he could provide. Nothing overly Western is depicted on the note, with perhaps the exception of the minor text on the reverse being written in a Latinate script. Nor is the major export of oil depicted anywhere. These were likely things the Shah would have wanted to downplay, while promoting more traditional things like Persian carpet design, Iranian flowers, and architecture. Nevertheless, the black ink counterstamp blocking out the Shah's image speaks volumes. So, in many ways, what the note hides or intentionally does not display is informative about history, while what it does show is informative about the perceived unifying aspects of the Iranian people. This is often true of paper money. Its purpose is to be acceptable to a wide range of consumers, showing them cultural or national aspects that they are meant to identify with and support. But in this case, one of the aspects, the Shah himself, turned out to be one that the people did not support. I'm Dr. Brad Hafford. I hope you enjoyed looking at this banknote with me. Join me again next time on Nook, part of my series, Money Talks.